Try A Friendship in Madness is a puzzle game where you form triangles to solve puzzles, the twist being that you'll be able to walk on walls and ceilings and eventually reflect a number of different things with them. The game sometimes reverts to common puzzler staples involving boxies, pulleys, and flipping the stage over or upside down, but it's how Try pushes these relatively simple mechanics to their absolute creative limits that make it stand out among other great puzzle games on the market right now. This excellent focus on experimentation was perhaps refined to a fault, as Try will sometimes take an idea that's initially fun on paper and stretch it far past its welcome. The plot is bare bones. You've been teleported to a different realm to help a monk rescue his fox friend from a madness that drove them apart. It's thankfully unobtrusive and minimal, as it's mostly told through skippable cutscenes between levels and appearances from the main character himself, and both are completely avoidable. At first glance, one might dismiss Try off its presentation as yet another shallow, pretentious, low-poly indie Steam game, but that'd be doing it a big disservice. Despite the game being all about challenging puzzles, the music and visuals elicit a relaxing, calm atmosphere with its warm color palette and melodic, lighthearted chanting, while a cute fox follows you along the way. The soundtrack makes use of a bunch of wacky instruments that give this native feel, and features some ridiculously catchy vocals that I'm not ashamed of admitting to singing along with like an idiot. Try is definitely the kind of game I can easily recommend based off its presentation alone. A large part of Try consists of low poly, square, and minimalistic environments that I'm sure you've seen in many other indie games, but the further you progress, the further the levels grow in complexity in both their design and art direction. This grows even more apparent in the later portions of the game, where there's a stage that resembles something straight out of Super Mario Galaxy, and another level with a bunch of abstract geometry just floating in space. The basics behind the triangles are that you can lay as many of them out however you want, and if you form one at an angle that makes sense to step on from where you are, you can get on it and assume its orientation. Think of it as you sticking to each triangle in the direction that it's facing, as long as you don't jump or move off them. These triangles can be joined together to form a bridge or a walkway wherever you please, as long as you have a surface to make all three of their points on. Running off these triangles will also preserve your momentum in the direction you are going, which is useful in a few certain areas. Laying out the triangles themselves can be done by freely moving your mouse or freezing the camera to accurately place the points. The goal for each level is to collect 3 sigils to leave. Some levels allow you to tackle each section at your own leisure in an open-ended nature, or others may follow a more linear structure in how they're presented. What propels Try are precarious layouts that change how players will use their triangles from room to room. A lot of rooms involve sharp, angular walls and ceilings, with increasingly complex architecture that'll have you making triangles in unnatural angles that you hadn't considered before. Soon, the game throws obstacles like acid and light-deterring fields in your way to make things even harder. Each part of every level feels like a natural progression in terms of variety and challenge, as it will take a pre-established role or mechanic it brought up and flip it on its head or introduce something new or different entirely. For example, boxes play their trope fairly straight at first by putting them on switches, but later on you can use them to teleport. And at one point they even change their gravity as you climb your triangles. One moment had me getting boxes out of the way of some lasers in a tight space, and that alone was pretty challenging to figure out. Outside of the time it could take to solve a few laser puzzles that we'll touch on later, most puzzles in this 21-hour-ish game felt like something that was cooking in the developer's head for a long time. It never felt half-baked or like filler. What also helps to keep Try interesting is its fiendish difficulty curve. The first level features its equivalent of Half-Life's Hazard course tutorial to get you familiar with movement. Then after getting the triangles, you learn that you can walk on walls, and at this point I'm pretty sure you're going to start confusing the floors from the ceiling. Later on you run into wood surfaces that you can't form triangles on, and discover how to stack them in irregular ways to get past it. One puzzle that drove me crazy simply had me jumping parallel off a wall into my own makeshift net in a corner. From here, the game steadily builds on its pacing, with puzzles and situations that go from manageable to almost seemingly impossible, and it just keeps going from there. Now, the moment I'd say Try throws its meticulous pacing out the window is when it introduces lasers. The whole idea is that you reflect these lasers with your triangles through increasingly complex environments. Sounds like a great addition to the game, right? Well, for the first few seconds it does, until the reality sets in that guiding these lasers with your triangles can turn into a very touchy and time-consuming process. Being able to control each point of the triangle before it forms with the tab button helps alleviate this, but this also means not knowing where the laser is going, as your camera is often frozen on the triangle itself, as the laser stretches right off the screen. What accentuates this problem is having to shine these lasers into small crystals. So what this ends up devolving to is pixel hunting the right way to place each point of your triangle, then sometimes having to guess where the laser is going. This wouldn't be so bad if this were a one-off element that's sparingly used, but it starts to take up a majority of the game from now on, with more severity in its challenge, and evolve into worse incarnations. Right after the stage where you find this ability, the game finds it fit to start throwing everything at you at once. Guiding the lasers grows more and more tedious as rooms suddenly grow larger and longer. And then, in probably one of the worst parts of the game, it makes these lasers lethal and forces you to guide them through a really tight space. Yeah, this is about as fun as it sounds. This theme of awkwardly bouncing things off your triangles tops off near the end with floating mist balls that you have to bounce into small holes. The concept starts off promising enough, where they float on a set path through the level and must have their paths cleared via environmental puzzles. What makes the mist balls frustrating to reflect with your triangles in comparison to the lasers is that they move in an arc when bounced, which not only means they're harder to predict, but will usually make them bounce straight into the walls or floor. The level design doesn't help this either, as just like the lasers, they'll force you to bounce these balls through a whole room or level, which doubles the tedium. Now, by no means am I trying to talk badly about the developers' intentions here, because in all actuality, they didn't do much wrong. Even if the ideas outstay their welcome, they're expanded on just as much as any other concept in Tri. You may even get past the tedium at times and find yourself appreciating what they were going for here. And to their credit, there's always a different kind of activity to take on a lot of the time. These mechanics still revolve around puzzles after all, so at the very least, you'll still get the satisfaction of having figured everything out. Still, having to guide these lasers for extended periods of time over long stretches of space, usually through guesswork and trial and error, can be a real slog. To add to the puzzles that you're already solving just to complete the game, they also added little idols as collectible secrets. These are well hidden and require their own puzzles and exploration to find, sometimes through techniques you wouldn't have known about in your first time passing through a level. Outside of just being fun to do, the only tangible reward you get out of collecting these is unlockable extras showing behind the scenes production pictures of the game. But you can also find free making of videos on YouTube from Rat King too. These secrets provide a lot of replayability in a meaningful way, so you're getting a good bang for your buck for however much you decide to spend on Tri. Also, I recommend getting the deluxe edition, since that includes a soundtrack and I'm willing to bet you may want that over time. At the end of the day, Tri of Friendship and Madness ends up as half of a game that I'd wholeheartedly recommend, and another half that I'd recommend with a huge asterisk. It regularly goes on sale for around $3 to $6 these days, which is a fantastic bargain to dip your toe in until the difficulty sets in. At its best, Tri stands out strong in the puzzle genre right now. Even at its worst, it's still worth playing for any puzzler fans who need a challenge.